Tom, a man who once lived a life of simplicity, never thinking he'd be the kind of person to take massive risks. Born and raised in a small town, Tom lived paycheck to paycheck, working as a middle school teacher for over 15 years. His life revolved around grading papers, spending evenings watching TV with his wife Sarah, and enjoying quiet weekends in their modest home. It was a life of comfort, but not luxury, steady, but never reaching beyond the edges of his financial security. Tom loved his job. He loved the idea of shaping young minds, and the school became his second home. But no matter how hard he worked or how much passion he poured into his students, he was still trapped in the same financial loop. His salary barely kept up with rising living costs. Every month, he and Sarah found themselves sitting at their small kitchen table, trying to figure out how to pay the bills without dipping into their meager savings. The financial strain was wearing on them, but they kept going, surviving 1 month at a time. One winter evening, their lives took a sudden turn. Tom came home early from work, his face pale and his hands shaking. The school had just announced deep budget cuts, and his position, one he had held for over a decade, was being eliminated. He was stunned. Teaching had been his life for so long, it felt like the rug had been pulled out from beneath him. He stared at Sarah across the dinner table that night, unable to meet her eyes as he whispered, "I lost my job." The atmosphere in their home grew tense in the following weeks. Every day, Tom would wake up, stare at his reflection, and wonder how he had let things come to this. Sarah tried to stay strong, but he could see the worry in her eyes. Their conversations were filled with talk of downsizing, selling the house, moving to a smaller apartment, cutting back on groceries. The walls felt like they were closing in. Tom started spending long hours staring at his laptop, scrolling through job listings and watching his savings dwindle. He was becoming desperate. One sleepless night, Tom stumbled upon an online forum where people were discussing high-risk investments, cryptocurrency. He had heard of Bitcoin, but he had never considered investing in something so volatile. Tom had always been cautious, always afraid to lose what little he had. But something about that night felt different. He sat there in the dark, illuminated only by the light of his screen, as story after story popped up about people who had struck gold with a single leap of faith. Could he do it? Could he risk it all? Tom's heart raced as he looked at the $5,000 sitting in his savings account. It was all they had left. A voice in his head screamed at him to close the laptop and go to bed, to forget this madness. But another voice, one of desperation and fear, whispered, "What if this is your chance? What if this is your only way out?" Against his better judgment, he clicked buy. In a single move, Tom had invested every last dollar of his savings into a risky cryptocurrency that was skyrocketing in value. He sat there, staring at the screen, his palms sweating and his heart pounding in his chest. Had he just made the biggest mistake of his life, or had he stumbled upon his miracle? The following days were a blur. Tom couldn't focus on anything but the fluctuating numbers on his investment app. His stomach twisted every time the value dropped, and his pulse quickened when it surged. He barely slept, barely ate. Sarah was growing more concerned by the day, asking him repeatedly what was wrong. But Tom couldn't tell her. Not yet. He wasn't sure if he was about to lose everything or change their lives forever. One night, he checked his phone and saw something that nearly knocked the breath out of him. His investment had tripled in value. The cryptocurrency market was on fire, and his gamble was paying off in a way he never thought possible. The next day, it doubled again. Tom sat at the kitchen table, staring at the numbers on his screen, tears welling up in his eyes. What had started as a desperate late-night decision had transformed into a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He was no longer looking at a few $1,000s, he was looking at hundreds of thousands. But Tom wasn't finished. Instead of cashing out right away, he made another calculated risk. He reinvested some of the money into another cryptocurrency. one he believed was about to explode. Every night he monitored the markets, barely sleeping, his nerves constantly on edge. The stakes had never been higher. But as the days passed, the gamble paid off again. This time, more than he could have ever imagined. One crisp autumn morning, Tom woke up to a notification on his phone that made him drop to his knees. His investment portfolio had crossed $1 million. He couldn't believe it. The man who had spent his entire adult life worrying about making ends meet was now a millionaire. He rushed to Sarah, waking her up with a mixture of laughter and tears. "We did it," he whispered, showing her the screen. "We're millionaires." Sarah blinked in disbelief, her hand covering her mouth as she looked at the numbers. They embraced, tears streaming down their faces. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the freedom. The freedom from worry. The freedom from sleepless nights spent fretting over bills. The freedom to finally dream again. In the weeks that followed, Tom and Sarah's life changed in ways they had never dreamed. They paid off their debts, invested in their future, and gave back to their community. But more than that, Tom had discovered something far more valuable than money. He had found courage. Courage to take risks, to believe in himself, and to embrace the unknown. Tom's story spread like wildfire. People couldn't believe how an ordinary man had made such an extraordinary leap from financial despair to millionaire success. His tale became a beacon of hope for those struggling, a reminder that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards. Tom took a huge risk, and it paid off in ways he never imagined. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to take a big risk to change your life? What was it, and how did it turn out? Share your story in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about the power of risk-taking and the rewards that come with it.